Sir, if you sign those papers today, this company will lose $65 million before tomorrow morning.
She's creating unnecessary panic.
No! I'm exposing the man who's stealing from you!
Enough!
I'm trying to save this company. Remember this moment! You just ignored the only person who could have saved this company!
The conference room doors burst open with a loud bang. Every conversation stopped. The projector continued displaying charts on the massive screen, but nobody looked at them anymore. A thick folder slammed onto the glass table so hard that several executives flinched. "No," Eleanor Brooks shouted. "You cannot approve that transfer." The room fell into complete silence. At the head of the table sat Richard Sterling, the billionaire CEO of Sterling Meridian Group. Dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, he slowly looked up from the contract lying before him. His calm expression never changed, but the room instantly felt colder. He studied the woman standing before him. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling, yet her eyes never left his. Finally, he spoke. "And you are Eleanor Brooks, Senior Financial Auditor." Richard glanced around the room before looking back at her. A senior financial auditor just interrupted a board meeting attended by the company's highest executives. "I had no choice." Several directors exchanged uneasy glances. Victor Kane, the company's chief financial officer, shifted nervously in his chair. "Eleanor," he said, forcing a smile. "Perhaps we should discuss this later." She turned toward him immediately. "Later?" Her voice cracked with frustration. "I've tried later." Victor looked down. "I sent you 12 emails. No response. I submitted 3 financial reports. No response. I requested 2 emergency audit reviews. Still nothing." She looked back at Richard. "So yes, this is exactly the right time." Nobody dared speak. Richard folded his hands together. "You interrupted a meeting involving a $150 million international acquisition. And if you approve that payment today," Eleanor replied firmly, "Sterling Meridian Group will lose $65 million before tomorrow morning." A quiet gasp spread across the room. Someone whispered, "$65 million?" Victor immediately stood. "Mr. Sterling, she's misunderstanding routine financial procedures." "No." Eleanor opened the folder. Document after document slid across the polished table. "These consulting firms don't legally exist." Another file. "These invoices were duplicated." Another. "These vendor addresses belong to abandoned buildings." Another. "And every payment ends inside the same offshore banking network." She looked directly into Richard's eyes. "Someone inside this company is stealing millions." Silence. Richard slowly picked up one page. He barely looked at it before placing it back down. "This is what you interrupted us for." Eleanor couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Did you actually read it?" "I've seen enough." "No, sir, you haven't." Richard stood. His expensive shoes echoed softly across the floor as he walked toward her. Every executive watched without moving. "You've interrupted one of the most important meetings in this company's history based on assumptions." "They're not assumptions. They're suspicions. They're facts." Victor stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, she's become completely consumed by these numbers." Eleanor stared at him. "Consumed?" Victor nodded. "I've explained several times that these transactions were properly authorized." "Liar." The word escaped before she could stop herself. The room froze. Victor's face turned red. "What did you call me?" "You heard me." Richard stopped only a few feet away from Eleanor. His voice remained calm. "You just called my chief financial officer a liar." "Because he lied." Victor slammed both hands on the conference table. "This is outrageous." Eleanor didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Richard. "I begged him to investigate." Victor shook his head. "No, you sent theories. I sent evidence. You sent patterns. I sent proof." Richard raised one hand. "Enough." Instant silence. He studied Eleanor for several long seconds. Then his eyes moved to her trembling hands. "You're shaking." She glanced down. Her fingers wouldn't stop trembling. Not because she was afraid of the evidence. Because she already knew what happened to employees who challenged powerful people in public. She slowly lifted her chin. "I'm shaking because nobody is listening." Richard gave a faint smile. "Responsible employees respect the chain of command." "I did." "They don't disrupt executive meetings." "I had no other choice." "They don't throw around words like fraud." "I wouldn't if it weren't true." Victor stepped closer. Mr. Sterling, I recommend security escort her out immediately. Eleanor's heart pounded. She knew this moment could cost her everything. Her career, her salary, her daughter's future. But if she stayed silent, $65 million would disappear. Richard looked at her one last time. Miss Brooks. Yes. You've embarrassed yourself today. Eleanor swallowed. No. She looked around the room. I've embarrassed the people who refused to listen. A few executives shifted uncomfortably. None of them defended her. Not one. Richard's expression hardened. You are dangerously close to insubordination. And you're dangerously close to approving a fraudulent transfer. The room became so quiet that even breathing sounded loud. Richard's jaw tightened. What did you just say? Eleanor took a slow breath. If that money leaves this company today, it will never come back. Victor laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. Eleanor ignored him. She pointed toward the folder. Everything you need to stop this is right there. Richard didn't even look. Instead, he turned toward the two security officers standing near the entrance. Escort Miss Brooks out. Eleanor blinked. What? Richard's voice became even colder. As of this moment, you're suspended pending disciplinary review. Her face turned pale. You're suspending me. Yes. For trying to protect this company? I'm suspending you for disrupting executive operations, making reckless accusations, and creating unnecessary panic. She looked around the room. Does nobody here see what's happening? No one answered. Not a single person. Victor avoided her eyes. The legal advisor stared at the table. Every executive remained silent. Richard stepped closer and lowered his voice. You made one mistake today, Miss Brooks. Eleanor looked directly at him. And what's that? You forgot who signs your paycheck. His words landed like a slap. The security officers slowly approached. Eleanor closed the folder and held it tightly against her chest. Tears threatened to fill her eyes. Not now. She refused to cry in front of them. She walked toward the door before suddenly stopping. Without turning around, she spoke quietly. No, Mr. Sterling. The room waited. You made the mistake. Richard frowned. She finally turned to face him one last time. You just ignored the only person who could have saved this company. She walked out. The heavy conference room doors closed behind her with a loud thud. Inside the room, Richard looked at Victor. Proceed with the transfer. Victor forced a smile. Immediately, sir. As the approval documents were signed, $65 million began moving through an invisible trail of fake companies and offshore accounts. And at that exact moment, Eleanor stepped into the elevator, not knowing that the decision made inside that room would soon change every life in the building forever. If you're already rooting for Eleanor, take a second to like this video and tell us in the comments. If you discovered your company was about to lose millions, would you risk your job to speak up or stay silent? Don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next will leave everyone speechless. The elevator doors slid shut, and the moment Eleanor was alone, the strength she had been holding on to disappeared. She leaned against the mirrored wall and closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Then another. She wasn't crying because Richard Sterling had suspended her. She wasn't crying because an entire room full of executives had watched her be humiliated without saying a word. She was crying because she knew exactly what would happen next. The transfer would go through. The money would disappear. And by the time anyone realized she had been telling the truth, it would already be too late. Her phone vibrated. The screen showed one name. Maya Collins. Maya worked in internal audit and had become Eleanor's closest friend over the past 5 years. Eleanor answered. Hello, Eleanor. Maya sounded out of breath. What happened? Half the building is talking about you. Eleanor let out a tired laugh. I've been suspended. What? For trying to stop the transfer. There was silence. Then Maya whispered. No. Richard actually approved it. Yes. Oh my God. I told him everything. I know you did. I showed him the documents. I know. I begged him to delay the payment. Another long silence followed. Finally, Maya asked the question Eleanor had been asking herself for weeks. What do we do now? Eleanor looked at the elevator doors as they opened into the lobby. We wait. For what? For the truth. She ended the call. Outside, the afternoon sun shone brightly, but she barely noticed. Everything around her felt strangely quiet. She drove home in silence. Every traffic light seemed longer than usual. Every mile gave her more time to replay the meeting inside her head. Richard's face. Victor's lies. The silence of the executives. His final words. You forgot who signs your paycheck. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. No, she whispered to herself. I forgot how afraid people are of the truth. When she finally reached home, the front door flew open before she could grab her bag. Mom, 10-year-old Lily ran straight into her arms. Eleanor smiled for the first time that day. Hey, sweetheart. Lily hugged her tightly. You're home early. I am. Did you finally get a day off? Eleanor hesitated. Something like that. Lily looked up with innocent eyes. That's good. Eleanor forced another smile. It is. That evening, the two of them made spaghetti together. Lily kept talking about school, while Eleanor tried to listen. And Mrs. Carter said my science project was the best in class. I'm proud of you. And guess what? What? I got an A. You did? Lily nodded excitedly. I knew you could. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then Lily suddenly became quiet. Mom. Yes. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do people lie? Eleanor stopped washing the dishes. What makes you ask that? There was a boy at school. What happened? He blamed another student for breaking a window. Did he do it? Lily nodded. Everyone believed him. Eleanor dried her hands slowly. And how did that make you feel? It wasn't fair. No. It made me angry. Eleanor knelt beside her daughter. Lily. Yeah. The truth doesn't always win immediately. It doesn't. No. Then how does it win? Eleanor gently smiled. Because lies have to keep hiding. And the truth only has to wait. Lily hugged her again. I like that. So do I. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Eleanor opened her laptop. She logged into her personal email. One new message. Then another. Then another. By midnight, there were 7. All from employees inside Sterling Meridian. The first read. I can't say this publicly, but I think you're right. The second. I've seen fake vendor approvals too. The third. Please don't mention my name. I'm scared. The fourth included screenshots. The fifth contained copies of payment records. By 1 o'clock in the morning, Eleanor sat frozen in her chair. This isn't just one department. She opened another attachment. It's everywhere. Someone had spent years building this scheme. Fake consulting firms. False maintenance contracts. Ghost suppliers. Hidden accounts. The deeper she looked, the bigger it became. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Instead, she answered. Hello. A nervous male voice replied. Miss Brooks. Who's this? My name is Daniel. I work in procurement. Eleanor recognized the department immediately. How did you get my number? Maya gave it to me. What do you need? Daniel lowered his voice. They're destroying files. Eleanor sat upright. What? I stayed late tonight. And I saw Victor Kane leave the records room. Her heartbeat quickened. He wasn't alone. Who was with him? I couldn't see. What were they doing? They were carrying boxes. What kind of boxes? Archive boxes. Eleanor's stomach tightened. What happened next? Daniel swallowed. I checked after they left. And entire payment files are gone. Gone. Yes. Eleanor stood from her chair. Daniel. I'm scared. I know. If they find out I called you. They won't. You promise? I promise. He hesitated. I copied one file before they destroyed it. You did? Yes. Keep it. I already hid it. Don't tell anyone. I won't. Not even Maya. Okay. If anyone asks. I never called. Exactly. After ending the call, Eleanor stared at the ceiling. They're covering their tracks. Which meant only one thing. Someone inside Sterling Meridian already knew the fraud was about to be discovered. Across the city, Richard Sterling sat comfortably in his penthouse office overlooking the skyline. His executive assistant entered carrying a tablet. The international transfer has been completed, sir. Richard smiled without looking up. Excellent. All $65 million has been released. Good. The acquisition team is preparing tomorrow's announcement. Richard nodded. Anything else? The assistant hesitated. There has been some discussion among employees. Richard sighed. About Eleanor Brooks? Yes. They'll move on. Sir. What? Many people respected her. Richard finally looked up. She was a financial auditor. She was also known for being honest. Richard closed the tablet in front of him. Honesty without discipline becomes disruption. The assistant remained silent. Richard leaned back. I've led billion-dollar companies for 15 years. Yes, sir. I won't have my leadership questioned by someone whose job is reviewing spreadsheets. The assistant nodded politely. but something about her expression suggested she wasn't convinced. Richard noticed. You disagree? She hesitated. I don't know enough to disagree. Then don't. Yes, sir. She quietly left the office. Richard stood and walked toward the massive window overlooking the city lights. Everything appeared perfect. The board trusted him. The investors admired him. The acquisition was moving forward. The company was growing. He had handled the situation exactly as a strong CEO should. Or so he believed. Less than 72 hours later, his confidence would begin to crumble. And when the phone rang just before dawn, bringing news that would shake Sterling Meridian to its core, Richard Sterling would finally remember the warning he had dismissed, the warning from the woman he had publicly humiliated. Just before 5:30 the next morning, Richard Sterling's phone rang. He frowned and reached for it without checking the caller ID. This better be important. A panicked voice answered. Mr. Sterling, we have a serious problem. Richard sat upright. What happened? It's the international transfer. Richard's expression hardened. What about it? The money is gone. He blinked. What do you mean gone? We've been trying to trace the accounts for the last 2 hours. And we can't. Richard threw the blanket aside and stood. That's impossible. I'm afraid it isn't. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and rushed to headquarters. By the time he arrived, the executive floor was in chaos. Employees whispered in every hallway. Security officers stood outside the boardroom. Lawyers hurried past carrying stacks of files. The atmosphere felt nothing like the confident meeting 3 days earlier. Richard pushed open the boardroom doors. What is going on? Board Chairman Harold Whitmore stood beside the large screen. His usually calm face was filled with anger. Sit down. Richard looked around. Every director was already seated. Victor Kane looked pale. The company's external auditors were present. So were federal investigators. Richard slowly sat down. Harold placed a report on the table. Read it. Richard opened the report. His heartbeat quickened. His confidence disappeared. The report confirmed the nightmare. The $65 million had passed through 6 shell companies before disappearing into accounts spread across multiple countries. Recovery was uncertain. Richard looked up. This can't be right. The lead investigator spoke. It is. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. Richard turned toward Victor. You told me everything had been verified. Victor quickly nodded. It had. The investigator interrupted. No. Every eye turned toward him. The documentation had been manipulated. Richard frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying someone inside Sterling Meridian helped organize this fraud. The room fell silent. Harold folded his arms. Does anyone remember an employee warning us about this exact transfer? Nobody answered. Harold looked directly at Richard. Do you? Richard lowered his eyes. Yes. Who was she? Eleanor Brooks. What did she tell you? Richard hesitated. Harold's voice became sharper. What did she tell you? Richard swallowed. She said the transfer was fraudulent. And she presented documents. And she asked us to investigate. Harold slammed his hand onto the table. And what did you do? Richard couldn't answer. The silence answered for him. Harold looked around the room. The only employee who tried to save this company was suspended. Nobody argued. Because nobody could. The investigator connected his laptop to the projector. A copy of Eleanor's first email appeared. Subject: Urgent financial irregularities requiring immediate review. Another email appeared. Another. 12 emails. 3 audit requests. 2 meeting requests. Every warning had been ignored. The investigator spoke quietly. If management had acted after the first report, he clicked the remote. More than $60 million would still belong to this company. Richard closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he realized his title had blinded him. Across the room, Victor nervously wiped sweat from his forehead. The investigator noticed. Mr. Kane. Victor looked up. Yes. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Victor forced a smile. Of course. The investigator placed another document on the table. This approval code belongs to you. Victor looked at it. It appears to. It doesn't appear to. The investigator's voice became firm. It does. Another document. This offshore authorization was approved using your executive credentials. Victor's breathing became uneven. I don't remember signing that. The investigator produced another file. We also recovered security footage. Victor's face turned white. Richard stared at him. Security footage? The investigator nodded. From the records archive. He played the video. The room watched in stunned silence as Victor entered the archive late at night, carrying empty boxes. Minutes later, he left carrying boxes filled with financial records. Richard slowly turned toward him. You told me everything was under control. Victor couldn't speak. You looked me in the eye. Richard's voice cracked. And lied. Victor finally whispered. I didn't have a choice. Harold stood. Oh, you had a choice. Federal agents entered the room. One step beside Victor. Victor Kane. He removed a pair of handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, destruction of corporate evidence, and financial crime. He removed a pair of handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, destruction of corporate evidence, and financial crimes. Victor looked desperately toward Richard. Please. Richard stood motionless. You used me. Victor lowered his head. The agents led him away. Nobody tried to stop them. Hours later, news channels across the country exploded with the story. Sterling Meridian loses $65 million in corporate fraud. Chief financial officer arrested. Board under investigation. Outside headquarters, reporters crowded the entrance. Employees watched in disbelief. One question echoed throughout the company. Where is Eleanor Brooks? Harold already knew the answer. He picked up his phone. Find her. That afternoon, Eleanor sat quietly in a neighborhood cafe reviewing the documents employees had sent her. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't smiling. She was trying to understand how many honest employees had been ignored. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Miss Brooks. She looked up. Harold Whitmore stood beside her table. She slowly stood. Mr. Whitmore. May I sit down? She nodded. He took a deep breath. I owe you an apology. Eleanor remained silent. So does this company. She looked out the cafe window. I tried to warn everyone. I know. No one listened. I know. I lost my job. I know. Harold sighed heavily. I can't change what happened. No. But I can ask something. She looked back at him. What? Please help us. Eleanor almost laughed. You fired me. I didn't. But the company did. Harold nodded. You're right. She folded her arms. So why would I come back? Because innocent employees are depending on someone they can trust. Eleanor thought about Lily. She thought about Maya, Daniel, the workers who had secretly risked everything to send her evidence. Harold spoke again. If you return. She interrupted. I have conditions. I'm listening. I won't report to another finance director. Agreed. I choose my own investigative team. Done. I answered directly to the board. Harold smiled for the first time. You should have been doing that from the beginning. 6 months later, Sterling Meridian's headquarters looked different. A new department occupied the entire 8th floor. Corporate integrity and risk management. Its director was Eleanor Brooks. Employees no longer whispered when they noticed suspicious activity. They reported it. Anonymous reporting systems were introduced. Independent audits became mandatory. Millions of dollars in additional fraudulent transactions were recovered before criminals could move them overseas. One afternoon, Eleanor received an unexpected visitor. Richard Sterling stood outside her office. He looked very different. No security team. No expensive confidence. No arrogance. Just a man carrying the weight of his mistakes. May I come in? She nodded. He entered slowly. I won't take much of your time. She waited. He looked around the office before meeting her eyes. I've replayed that board meeting in my head every day. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Richard continued. I kept asking myself one question. What question? Why didn't I listen? Eleanor answered honestly. You believed your position made you right. He nodded slowly. It did. And that was my greatest failure. He looked down. I judged your title. You did. I confused confidence with wisdom. You did. I thought leadership meant always having the answers. Eleanor gently shook her head. It means listening when someone else does. Richard smiled sadly. I know that now. He extended his hand. I'm sorry, Eleanor. She looked at his hand for several seconds before shaking it. I accept your apology. Relief filled his face. Thank you. As he walked toward the door, he stopped. Congratulations. For what? You became the leader I failed to be. He quietly left. Eleanor watched the door close. She felt no anger, only peace. That evening she arrived home to find Lily waiting on the porch. There you are. Eleanor laughed. There I am. Lily threw her arms around her. We watched you on the news. You did. They said you saved the company. Eleanor smiled. I didn't save it alone. You didn't. A lot of brave people finally decided to tell the truth. Lily looked up proudly. I want to be brave like you. Eleanor kissed her forehead. Then always tell the truth. Even when it's difficult. Lily nodded. I will. Eleanor smiled as they walked inside together. She had lost her job. She had been humiliated. She had been ignored. But she had never lost her integrity. And in the end, that was worth far more than $65 million. If Eleanor had stayed silent, the truth might never have come out. Tell us in the comments. Would you have gone back to help the company after everything they did to her? If you enjoyed this story of courage, justice, and second chances, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next emotional story may challenge everything you think you know about law.